I believe honorable men are the kinds of men that say they'll do something and do it. They are the men that have courage in the face of adversity. They're the men that are unapologetic about who they are. They're the kind of person that is willing to accept death over being forced to be something different. These are the kind of men that are loyal. These are the kind of men that would die before betraying their cause. And they're the very same men that keep society functioning. A while ago, I read a biography on Napoleon Bonaparte. Needless to say, he was a remarkable person. Good or evil, he did quite a lot in his short life. I honestly believe, had he not likely been suffering from some health issues at the time of Waterloo, he probably would have won that battle. One of the things that I found interesting about him was that he was profoundly popular with the everyday soldier. In fact, he was not very popular with the general French population. It was the military that loved him. And this is the group of people that suffered the most under him. When he took Russia, he brought something like, I can't remember, it was like 600,000 men or something like that. An incredible number of soldiers for the time. And the Russian strategy was actually to not fight. They did not engage with him until he reached Moscow. And instead of engaging with them, they abandoned Moscow. So he walked into Moscow, he conquered it, he sat there for a little while. And I'm not sure why they didn't decide to, I think the winter was coming, so they realized that they didn't want to go and move on to St. Petersburg. And if I remember it right, they didn't have enough supplies to stay through the year in Moscow. So ultimately he decides to retreat and effectively loses Russia by Russia's brilliant strategy of just not engaging with them. And during the process of their return back to France, marching through Russia, the winter comes and just wreaks havoc on them. The only reason I'm sharing this is because during that march, the Russian army just brutally harassed those strung out lines of men trying to get back. And by the time Napoleon made it back to France, he had lost the vast majority of his soldiers, just dead. I mean, and keep in mind, that was 600,000 men he took out there, or possibly more. And something like 100,000 made it back. I mean, the losses were incredible. Yet this man was still loved by the military. So in this book that I read, it talked a lot about his interactions with the everyday soldier and just how he would talk to them. And he'd give these, and I guess in the book they call it haranguing. Maybe that's a French word, but it's basically the equivalent of giving a rallying speech before battles. It was something that he was very good at. And so one of my questions was, if I were a soldier during that period of time, and I was about to walk into a battle that I believed I was going to lose, what would get me to walk into that? Almost every military movie ever made has some version of that story, where soldiers walk into an unbeatable scenario and they choose to persist. And it's that moment where they choose to persist that kind of gets you to start tearing up a little bit. When you know that these guys know that it's their last moments, or at least they think it's going to be their last moments, and they do it anyways. And the more I try to think about that from like a logical perspective, just it doesn't make sense. Why would you go into a battle that you're going to lose? And generally, I would say it's probably smart for a general to not send his soldiers into a battle they're going to lose. It's really, in most cases, I don't think they do. I think they do the right thing and they'll surrender before sacrificing unnecessary lives if they're confident they're going to lose. But the glory seems to be when those soldiers persist and they succeed. The most famous story of all would probably be the Spartans at Thermopylae, the 300 Spartans that hold off the Persian army. I have to imagine that those soldiers in that battle were at least aware to some degree of the size of their enemy. And I would have to imagine as well that they might have thought they were going to die, but they did it anyways. They went anyways. And as illogical as that decision may be, I admire it. And that kind of courage, that persistence is incredible. And I think just about everybody else on earth admires that. And that's why I keep on coming back to the question, what would make me want to do that? When those situations happen, it's almost like having to slay the figurative dragon, except it's not so figurative anymore. It almost becomes literal if the dragon is the overwhelming opposing army. See, I don't think I'm a naturally brave person. I would like to be, and I know some people that I think are naturally brave. But I don't actually believe that most men are born that way. I believe they become that way. So how do you take the man that as a child would run away from any signs of danger, which is most little boys, and how do you turn him into the man that will run to it, even knowing that he's going to die? I think the one word that best describes it is probably honor. And I almost hesitate to use it because I feel like it's used in such a overly simplistic way. If there were a more reverent word that I could use that meant roughly the same thing, I would use it, but I don't think there is. The way I would describe honor is the unyielding commitment to stay true to what you've agreed to, even when faced with insurmountable forces. A song or a poem would probably serve better to capture the depth of the word honor, but I'm going to do the best I can to describe it. Probably the best tribute I can give to the word honor is a few examples. I believe honorable men are the kinds of men that say they'll do something and do it. They are the men that have courage in the face of adversity. They're the men that are unapologetic about who they are. They're the kind of person that is willing to accept death over being forced to be something different. These are the kind of men that are loyal. These are the kind of men that would die before betraying their cause. And they're the very same men that keep society functioning. And ironically, war is probably the best way to find out who those people are, and also the best way to get rid of them. An honorable man is a man that would give his last piece of bread to his friend. An honorable man is that Napoleonic soldier that picks up the fallen standard in the battlefield and runs back into the fight, knowing that he's going to be the first target of everybody else on the other side. An honorable man is a man that fixes what he has broken. He's a man that protects his family and provides for him. He's a man that does not forsake his values. And he's a man that tells the truth. Also, ironically, it may seem like a waste to let an honorable man sacrifice himself, but that same honorable man probably wouldn't think too hard about whether or not to sacrifice it in the first place, because he would just do it. And it's worth it because in a world where good and evil exist, it's always worth it to do good, even if you are forgotten. Even if your sacrifice does not ultimately win the day. I would ask, why does it feel so right when men willingly sacrifice themselves, even under circumstances that are not likely to make a difference? And I would say it's because right and good is not on a timer. If and when our star burns out 1,000,000 years from now, doing what was right will still have been right even long after there are no people on earth. So we need to strive to be that honorable man. Let's not be the men that have to do a cost-benefit analysis before they do the right thing. Dishonorable men have succeeded at the highest levels of our society for thousands of years and will continue to do so. But ultimately, that doesn't matter to a man that's honorable because his worth and his value are not going to be tied to his status acquisition. In The Lord of the Rings, in the third movie, The Return of the King, Aragorn takes the army of Gondor and Rohan and whoever else is left, takes them to the Black Gate in hopes of distracting Sauron so that Frodo has a chance to get the ring to the mountain where it can be destroyed. And he gets up there and he says, he's pretty succinct, and I love what he says, and it's probably better than what I would say. But he says, "A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. A day of woes and splintered shields, when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight. I bid you now, for all that you hold dear on this good earth, stand, men of the West." In the end, we're all going to die. But I hope that when I die, I can say that I lived an honorable life. And if I was giving a speech to myself before a hopeless battle, I think it would go something like this. These are the moments where you find out who you are, because we never really get to know ourselves until we stand at the gates of hell. Are you living to survive, or are you living in your fullest capacity? Have you removed yourself from the chains of fear, or has fear become your master? Are you the man that a child could trust to keep them safe? Would you run to your death to keep your brothers safe? When your values become your king, you will no longer be a slave to fear, a slave to apathy, a slave to selfishness. Honor may seem like a simple word, but it describes a people that know their actions live forever, even if they do not. Even a thing forgotten will never change the fact that it happened. The future belongs to someone else, but today belongs to you.